Here.
Vice Chairman Dibble.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner Zarguni. Commissioner Miller. Commissioner York.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Mandel.
Here.
And Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Here.
Quorum established.
Thank you. At this time, are there any public comments that need to be read now, or are they all addressed during the review of our report?
Thank you, sir. This is Andrew Demas with Development Services. Yes, the latter is more than likely going to be the appropriate. They're all related to specific items.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to approval of absences. There are none. Moving on to approval of minutes. At this time, do I have a motion or comments on the minutes as submitted? I will need a motion, please.
This is Commissioner Schrader. I make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted.
This is Vice Chairman Dibble. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion passes. Moving on to the item 5, consent public hearing items. At this time, are there any items that any member would like to pull and discuss separately, or are we going to review them all under the consent items? Any comments? All right, Andrew, at this time, the consent public hearing, please.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. So starting with new plats. Okay, this is just taking a second. So starting with new plats, item number 2 is Miller Subdivision Block 3, Lot 3R, a final of 0.3078 acres. Item number 3, Rancho Vista Unit 22, a final of 10.61 acres. Item number 4, Peaceful Estates, a final plat of 9.394 acres. Item number 5 is a conditional approval or a conditional plat for Royal Oak Futures Unit preliminary plat of 55.24 acres. Item number 6 is also conditional, Gemini Acres Unit 1, a final of 73.90 acres. For this particular section, staff and the technical review committee have reviewed the plats and recommend approval, or in some cases we have 2 conditional approvals of the listed plats, and we'll keep moving on. So item number 7, time extensions. We have Rod Plaza, Block 1, lots 1 and 2, a final of 7.77 acres. Item number 8, which is also a time extension, a first request of London Town Subdivision Unit 4, a final of 7.363 acres. Moving on to staff recommends approval on both, since this is a second request for Rod Plaza and a first request for London Town. Moving on to item number 9, a new plat with a variance. So both of these are related to the same plat, which is Gulf Breeze Annex lots 5 and 6, a final of 8.574 acres. The variance is a request for waiving sidewalk construction along the property. The surrounding properties do not have built sidewalks, so staff does recommend approval. Now under new zoning, we have item number 11, which is a public hearing for case 0321-01 McJays and Associates. This is a request for a planned unit development. The request is from the RS6IO, which stands for Single Family 6 with the island overlay, to RMAT, which is the multi-family district with the island overlay and a planned unit development. Staff recommends approval. Item number 12, which is case 0321-03, Walter Duane and Terrell Park Road 22. The request is from the RMATIO, multi-family AT district with the island overlay, to the RV recreational vehicle district with the island overlay. Staff recommends approval. And as we get to the public hearing, I'll read in those public comments. And then lastly, item 13, which is case 0321-04, Mount Carmel Special Permit Extension. This is not a true rezoning, meaning the rezoning has already been approved 24 months ago. This is specifically addressing the expiration of the special permit. So staff is recommending approval and agreeing with the applicant who is requesting an additional 24 months specifically on the portion of the property that has the SP. They're just essentially putting more time on the clock. And that concludes the consent agenda. If there's any questions for staff, I'd be more than happy to address them. And then once we get to that point, we open the public hearing. I'll read in all of our wonderful public comments.
Thank you, Andrew. And for the record, Commissioner York will be abstaining on items 4 and 11, and Commissioner Salazar Garza will be abstaining from item 5. And I will say that again when I separate for motions and seconds. So at this time, do we have any comments on items 2 through 13 from the Planning Commission? No comments at this time? All right, Andrew, I will open the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. So we're going to switch gears on the screen and go to the folders. And
I want you guys to quit talking for a little bit. Is that okay?
I'm sorry?
Thank you. And if everybody could mute your phone, please. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Okay, so back on track, we're going to go through the various folders, and we'll start with McJay's and Associates. That was the first case. This one, I do not believe we received 0 public comments. This case is, again, the request for the PUD on North Padre Island. We'll go to the next case, which is the RV Park, which is listed as Walter, Dwayne, and Terrell. We did have 1 public comment, which simply checked the box, and just for transparency, so you'll see on the screen, it was simply checking the box in favor of the rezoning case. And then lastly, we have the Mount Carmelite special permit. We'll go back to our folder. And we have 2 opposition letters that came back. The first one, as you'll see on the screen, states in opposition, this is a single family zoning area. It is best that it stays that way. I am not okay with an apartment complex. The second opposition letter was an email sent to the city secretary's office, which, as you can see, a little bit of text. As the owner of multiple single-family homes within the area of the proposed rezoning case, I am opposed to the zoning as a property as multifamily based on the map provided with the notice I received. The surrounding neighborhoods are all single-family dwellings. A multi-level apartment complex, which I assume is the norm for R1 zoning, is not conducive to the entire surrounding neighborhood homes, and will definitely affect their values. There are currently no apartment complexes within this area, nearest one being behind H-E-B at Robert and Alameda. I have, it lists various addresses. I have these homes. This rezoning request for multifamily housing should be denied. Just to be clear, the rezoning already happened 2 years ago. This is merely addressing the extension of the special permit. No plans have been submitted, just for the record, no plans have been submitted for the construction of an apartment complex. And that concludes the public comments received for the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Andrew. At this time, I will close the public hearing portion of the consent items and entertain additional comments. I have one on item 13. Were we in a unanimous decision on the zoning change previously? Were there comments and opposition? And can you kind of tell me about that?
I'm assuming you're speaking of the Mount Carmelite case, sir?
That is correct.
Yes, it was not a mixed vote. It was a unanimous vote 2 years ago. Back then, it was split zoning between 3 different zoning categories, and I'll pull up the map just so we can be on the same page. But as you'll see in the PowerPoint that's loading up, the original zoning for the entire area for the original assisted living facility was single family district across the board. And let me minimize this off to the side. So we took for lack of a better term, a scalpel and tried to carve a rezoning that would make everyone happy. And when we say that is, obviously you want to have the commercial zoning closest to South Alameda and Everhart. Behind that buffer between what could be potential single-family homes someday in the future with apartments. The SP section is only the one labeled Tract 1. That is the subject of discussion for tonight. The map could have been a little bit misleading because when you, almost like when you touch one, you touch them all. So that is why it had a hatched area. But true to what the actual request is tonight is only extending the SP on this one piece. This rezoning for Tract 2 and Tract 3, that door has opened and closed. They were approved by City Council 2 years ago and we have moved forward. The SP is, again, the one piece that's kind of languishing out there.
And can you explain why they're asking for the extension?
So without divulging too much of the information that was given by the realtor, only because that information is still in negotiation, meaning they do have a project that they're looking at moving onto this site, but because it is still going through closing, I don't feel quite comfortable giving the name yet, but it is a use consistent. It is not an apartment complex. It is, I can say it's involving a charitable organization building a new facility on this site. But again, it hasn't gone through closing. Based on the conversation I had with the realtor, it is simply eliminating the zoning question from the topic until that property has been closed upon. All the uses that we listed in the SP, just to kind of recap, and we did call them out in these special permit conditions. So the big question that comes up from the neighborhood is fear of any type of nuisance use or obnoxious use, as you know, any of us living next to a McDonald's or Whataburger would not want to go through that. So specifically, we added lines, as you'll see on the screen, as avoiding a restaurant that does not have a drive-in facility or an accessory use, or we eliminated convenience goods. You know, we don't want a convenience store right on that corner next to the single-family homes. As you can see, we eliminate things like blood plasma and minor emergency centers, things that generate large amounts of traffic, again, because of noise, light, sound, we don't want to put right next to the homes. For all intents and purposes, this SP actually serves as a protection for that single family home, and extending it would further that cause rather than if we let the SP expire, then the owner could build an apartment complex tomorrow or any of these now. It's zoned RM1 at base value, so theoretically they could build an apartment complex. But again, based on those conversations I've had with the developer, that is not on the table by any extent of the imagination.
Thank you, Andrew. That answers my question. So are there any other questions or comments for items 2 through 13?
This is Commissioner Schrader. We'll make sure I understood that correctly. Is Andrew, can you pull back up the slide that you had with the different parcels?
Yes, sir.
So from what I recall, essentially this particular Tract 1 is Tract 1 and Tract 2 are ostensibly the same thing. It's just that the special permit is effectively creating that additional restriction on only that piece, and not, obviously not, Tract 2 is not under the special permit. But otherwise those two tracts are essentially free to be developed the same, only the fact that the more restrictive nature applies to Tract 1.
Correct. That is correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I've got a question on the Gemini Estates deal, and I apologize, I don't have the agenda in front of me.
No worries. That is item number 6. Yes, sir.
I was reading can you pull up the plat comments?
Sure. It's the actual. Okay, they're loading right now. All right, sir, we have them on the screen.
I think going down about a page or two, there's some highlighted areas, and my question's specific in the right there on these the septic issue. I guess this property's in the ETJ, I'm assuming. So you kind of have to have a little city and county cooperation on this, or at least maybe joint review. And I guess my question is, it talks about providing financial guarantees for septic system. I mean, typically the septic happens at the time of the building construction, which I'm assuming this works like any other property in the ETJ. They have to sign a water agreement with the city, and then in turn, they agree to subject themselves to the building requirements of the city of Corpus. And so they wouldn't, you could never get a C of O for a property that didn't have septic. So I'm a little bit curious as to why there's a requirement for a bond for septic to be done when we know that's going to be handled during the building process.
And that's a fair question. I don't see Juan Pimentel, our county engineer, on the line, but I'll do my best to kind of explain the discussions we had as this was working its way through the technical review committee. So first things first, you're absolutely correct. This property is within the extraterritorial jurisdiction, the ETJ of the city. Second, it is the plan of the developer to obtain a water service agreement, what we call water contracts, meaning one of the conditions of those water contracts is they must obtain a residential building permit. And of course, the condition of the residential building permit is you have to supply your design and ultimate build of the on-site sanitary facility, the septic system, essentially. So it's kind of like a domino effect. You can't get to one stage without the other. And ultimately, in order to get that building permit, which is a condition of the water service agreement, you have to have that septic system built. So it is the responsibility of the builder at the time they supply the residential building permit, the plan set itself, that they provide the plans to the health department for that septic system. Now, that's not to say the county still can request this comment as part of the TRC, and we do respect their comments. And we do want to push them forward so the planning commission does get a fair chance to review the comments as they're submitted to us. Now, I can also tell you that the county is not simply just choosing this particular site to have this request. We do have a list of several different projects along the 2444 corridor, which is essentially way out Staples, that they've made the exact same comment. So it's not an atypical comment, but I do understand where the applicant is coming from when they say, if I have to pull a building permit, why am I requesting to also supply a financial guarantee? That I don't have a good answer for that. That is exactly why we're bringing it to the planning commission as a conditional. And I was hoping the county engineer would be on the line to sort of give some guidance on why they're insisting on the comment. But nevertheless, that is where we are today.
The sections noted.
Yes, and as you'll see all the way to the right, it's part of the.
Go to the left.
I'm sorry, to the left.
Hey, Andrew, this is Juan Pimentel with.
Oh, good. Thank you, sir. I'm glad you're on the line.
Sorry about that. Late.
So the question, Mr. Pimentel, is there at the Commissioner Dibble, Vice Chairman Dibble is asking essentially the rationale, the guidance behind requesting a financial guarantee, despite knowing that the applicant will be obtaining a building permit.
Okay, yeah, it's per our subdivision rule requirements, and it is a requirement. We did talk to our legal department, and it's still required by the developer. Are you there, Andrew?
Yes, sir. We are listening. Vice Chairman Dibble, were you able to hear Mr. Pimentel's explanation?
I did, but I guess I'm just wondering who's got ultimate jurisdiction here. Because, again, to me, no other subdivision, I don't know how you require a developer to put in septic. You don't know how big the houses are. You don't know, what the layout is and what needs to happen.
I'm sorry, Commissioner or Vice Chair Dibble. Let me ask this real quick, Andrew. Being that it's a conditional and it is under the plats, are we able to make the recommendation to remove that portion of it? Is that within our purview, or is that something we can do? Is make a motion to remove that portion of it, or is that determined by others?
So you have a couple of options, cards to play in your deck. One, you can of course always vote to approve a plat outright. Two, which is essentially saying, despite the comments, we want to approve. Option number two is you can approve with conditions, meaning a conditional approval, meaning you can essentially say this needs to be resolved before the plat can be recorded. Or three, of course, you can always deny a plat if you feel that this reason is enough that the plat doesn't meet the standards of the TRC and therefore Planning Commission cannot recommend it. So again, three options: approve outright, approve with conditions, or deny.
Again, sorry, Vice Chair Dibble. I just wanted to clarify our options there. So go ahead with your comments.
This is Nina Nixon Mendez, Assistant Director. The one thing I did want to bring to your attention is that we do have an interlocal agreement with Nueces County. And it does provide that we do need to adhere to the Nueces County platting requirements, and that the strictest rule prevails. And so in this case, that is why staff is recommending for the conditional approval, and that they would need to provide for that. So again, that recommendation is based on our agreement with the county.
Buck Bryce here, City Legal. To follow that up, Commissioner Dibble had a question as far as jurisdiction, and we have an agreed to concurrent jurisdiction where we enforce both rules pursuant to the interlocal.
So I mean, and I don't know if this is a platting question, but just more from a logistics question. I mean, so is the developer supposed to get a bond for the whole subdivision, or now you're saying he's got to furnish a septic system? And I mean, I just, if this was in town, where it was just City of Corpus, this subdivision would probably get approved subject to a builder or end user on the lot, being responsible for that. I guess I just don't understand
So, and I think, and I apologize for interrupting. So it sounds like we're narrowing down to two options. Option A would be approval outright. If the commission feels that the plat meets all of the requirements, then you can absolutely vote to approve and say, we're not concerned with the comments. Or option two, approve with conditions. Part of those conditions, the Planning Commission could list that if the applicant is not providing on-site sanitary as the builder, then yes, they would need to pull the bond. Or option two, you could say Planning Commission wants staff to, let's say, hold up public improvement approvals unless a bond is submitted. There's options you can take at this point, but you always have the option to just outright approve.
Okay, but I guess what you're saying is there an option to recommend approval on this plat subject to developer not doing a bond, but as part of the building process, they've got to furnish septic on the lot? I mean, is that an option? I mean, again, I don't know what the legalities are, but other than it being in the ETJ, I mean, this is done on a regular basis on most everything over, in London.
I think a middle ground, and this is just, I'm sure Buck will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a middle ground could be applicants shall secure a financial guarantee if they do not secure a water contract. That way the water contract will cover the septic system having to be part of the residential building permit. But if they choose not to do a water contract and find some other source of water, let's say they go on a well system, which I seriously doubt Mr. Mastagassi will do. But nevertheless, then if they choose not to obtain a water contract from the city of Corpus Christi, then absolutely they need to do the financial guarantee.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
this is Commissioner Schrader.
Can you tell us how this is handled if this was not in the ETJ? So for example, I think Coves at Lago Vista, I believe those are larger lots, or somewhere in that area. We've got septic lots that are in the city water, but no sewer system. How are those plats handled? Is that the process you just went over?
Exactly. So the process is they obtain a water contract from us, which ties them to obtaining a building permit. And again, part of that building permit requires the OSSF, the on-site sanitary facility, must be submitted to the health department and approved before we can release that building permit. So it's kind of a trickle down effect, like I call it the domino effect, because if one of those steps fails, you don't get a building permit, you have to start all over. So that's in a nutshell how we protect that building permits will be obtained even if you're on a septic system.
Okay, thank you. Well, my 2 cents, it seems like that solution would solve all of the problems, with the county's concern being that the end user gets left with nothing. So I think that stipulation of either having a water contract or putting up the bond, I think would be a good solution.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation for an amendment on this. I don't know if there's more discussion on it, but.
Commissioner Schrader, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, that's what I had come to as well, because I think in other words, and I think that's actually what's in place here, but the fact that Mr. Demas indicated that should be amended that way, I fully agree that it should, so that it stipulate that only if a water contract is agreed to. I thought that was already in the stipulation, because I do think if both are left in place, I think it's problematic for all, because tracking bonds on a subdivision for individual lots, what if the developer sells it to other builders to develop? How do you track that? How do you, to actually build the home? You almost have to put in septic before they're ever built. That has pitfalls in and of itself. So I certainly agree wholeheartedly with that stipulation, that if a water contract is provided, they do a water contract, not having the bond is the better course of action, especially on a multi-lot development. A whole different ballgame on an individual lot.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments at this time for this item or any other?
Can the applicant speak?
Technically, we closed public hearing. Andrew, thoughts?
Well, you, as the chairman, you have the power to reopen the public hearing if you so desire.
I will. At this time, I'll open the public hearing for the applicant.
Thank you. So just to comment on this, I mean, we're happy to actually be a part of the water contract and be a part of the city permitting process. We're very engaged in that, and to agree with some of the comments made here, we're going to have a septic design approved by the county before we start the home, and we actually have to get a septic inspection done before we can get a certificate of occupancy for the home. Even though this is in the ETJ, it's going to be treated like our King Estates neighborhood that we have in front of Lago Vista, with the same concept of the homes have to have septic systems before they're actually fully functional. What I would also ask this body and city staff is to look at that local agreement that's in place. I think that agreement is in 2003. I think that thing is a little bit old, and I don't think there was water contracts available at that time that bounded land developers / builders to pull building permits at some point, which does protect the county, does protect the city, and actually protects me as the land developer and me or other builders in the neighborhood to fulfill the requirement of having some type of sewer system, which in this case would be the septic system. So I definitely want to be able to get this project up and running. Do have some fears with the bond. concern. As pointed out, I don't want people going and claiming a bond against me when I've sold them an individual lot. That's why we want to be a part of the water contract. And I would just again ask that if this body or the staff body can do something to invite planning commission members / the building community, development community with city staff and the county, and look at this agreement that was made in 2003, because we've been dealing with this plat and some of the comments for over 6 months now, which is detrimental to building and developing. So I think a lot of clarification coming from that would be very helpful. So thank you for opening up the public comment. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I will close the public comment. Andrew, can you take those comments under consideration regarding our agreement with the county and the city?
Absolutely. I don't want to speak too soon, but I'm sure on a future agenda there might be topics involving the interlocal agreement. Perhaps it would be better for us to do a briefing at a future meeting on what exactly is the interlocal agreement. And then I'm sure I'll probably ask Buck's advice on if there needs to be amendments, potential subcommittees, something to that effect that would walk that through, having a few commissioners on board. But I'm sure we're going to have a few internal discussions before we get to that point. But I do see a future briefing on the horizon.
Thank you,
Andrew. On this particular item, if I'm going to make a recommendation to, to modify what's recommended, in other words, have them either furnish a bond or enter a water contract, do we need to pull that off the consent agenda, or is that a motion that I can make now on this specific item?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to read them and I'm going to pull that one separate as part of the consent, though. So I'll make a separate motion for that one for you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, are there any other comments regarding items 2 through 13 at this time? Seeing none, I will have multiple motions for the abstaining parties and for item 7. So I need a motion for items 2, 3, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 13 as presented.
This is Commissioner Miller. I move that we approve those numbers as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Schrader, second.
I approve.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. At this time, I will need a motion for items 4 and 11 with Commissioner York abstaining.
Commissioner Schrader, I make a motion that we approve items 4 and 11 as presented by staff.
Commissioner Miller, I second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same. Motion passes. Moving on to motion on item 5 with Commissioner Salazar Garza abstaining.
Chairman, I believe you meant number 14. I was reading a note here. Not number 5.
Do I have that one wrong?
14 is what I have on my list as abstention for Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Sorry, you're right. I marked mine wrong. You're right. Okay. So item
5
just with
5 wasn't on the list anyway, so we'll need a separate motion.
There we go. Yep. Item 5. Can I get a motion to approve item 5?
As Vice Chairman Dibble, I'll make a motion to approve item 5.
And do I have a second?
Commissioner Miller, I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, Mr. Dan, item number 7 needs a motion, please.
I wanted to make a motion to approve item number 7 with an amendment, I guess, as to what's presented, that the owner developer will either furnish a bond as in the initial directive or agree to enter into a water contract for the entire subdivision.
All right, do I have a second for this motion?
Well, this is Michael York. I want to make sure we're doing, did I miss something, or are we on the wrong number?
I thought that was.
I'm showing item 7 is Rob Plaza.
I'm sorry, you're right. I've got my number 6. I have it all written down as under number 7. That is number 6. You are correct. So your motion Vice Chairman Dibble is for number 6. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, sir.
That is
I
correct.
second. Salazar Garza, I second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
One moment, Mr. Chairman, sorry, just a quick point of order. I don't want, not that I'm trying to muddy the waters. Just to be clear, when we were going over the review, and I want to make sure all the commissioners were clear on it, they're only addressing the water contract issue. There is another financial guarantee section about streets and water, and there was one more comment about drainage. Are y'all comfortable with those comments remaining? So that's what I have up on the screen. All of the ones highlighted in yellow are not purely related to water. 2 of them are related to water. 1 is related to drainage, and 1 is related to streets and curb and gutter. So I just want to make sure that everyone is clear before you say yes.
This is Commissioner Schrader.
Andrew, can you answer?
The way I
This is
understood this.
my understanding of those comments, that the sewer comment was an issue because there was no sewer being constructed, but the streets and the water will be constructed before the plat is recorded, is my understanding. So the financial guarantee wouldn't apply. Is that incorrect?
So you just, again, I want to be clear. So there's financial guarantees for streets 1, water 2, and on-site sewage 3. So that is 3 separate aspects of the financial guarantee. The discussion that we had was only addressing sewage, and we didn't talk about streets and we didn't talk about water. So I just want to make sure you're comfortable with those items. Essentially, those comments will remain as a part of the conditional approval. So as presented on the agenda, it's a conditional approval with the 1 amendment of either get a bond or get a water contract. But these other comments stay on. So I'm just being overly paranoid about it, but I want to be extra sure. You know
Andrew,
exactly
I think you make a good point, and based on what you're saying, I think I would prefer to further amend that such that the financial guarantees for street and water and drainage are an either a financial guarantee or it's constructed before the plat is recorded, which is consistent with how within the city limits. As far as how we do that, legally, I don't know where we were at within that motion if we voted. So someone can tell me how we need to do that.
I think Vice Chairman Dibble would need to amend his original motion. So we have a motion and a second. And that's why I wanted to kind of pump the brakes a little bit before we got too far. And he can amend his motion to essentially reiterate what you just said.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'll do, Andrew. But let me ask you a question. When it comes to the actual subdivision construction, the city's going to approve this just like they would if the subdivision was constructed in the city limits, correct? So it would still be subject to the same requirements, is that right?
That is correct. We would do the same public improvement review like we would do on any other subdivision in the city.
And again, you couldn't record the final plat unless this work was done according to city standards, correct?
Correct. The only 2 ways you can record is either, yes, your public improvements are built to 75%, or you receive some type of deferment agreement. Those are the only 2 paths to get you to recordation.
Okay, well then I want to amend my recommendation to eliminate.
Dan, yeah. I got one more question, Andrew. Because this is outside the city, well, typically at the end, the public improvements are accepted, inspected and then accepted by the city. Does the city do the inspections on this, or is that the county?
No, we would conduct the inspections. However, we would not accept them because they're outside the city limits. So it's a yes and no to your answer. Yes to inspection, no to acceptance. So they're still OCL.
Except for the water.
Except for water.
Except for the water. But commissioners, if I may, this is Nina, if the street infrastructure and drainage, that would potentially be accepted by Commissioners Court if it is a public street.
Right.
So
okay,
that's
I just want to make sure that the appropriate people are having the chance to inspect and sign off on the 75%. If that needs to be the county or the city or both, just want to make sure we're not overlooking that in our motion.
I think these are private streets, aren't they, and not public streets?
That's correct.
This is Juan Pimentel. That's correct. They're private roads. It's a private subdivision.
Right.
But the
So the-
process would be, if it were a public street, then the county, the commissioner's court would accept the street
Could potentially.
if it were public.
Right, but in this case, since it's private, the city's got the approval authority on that, correct?
We're just approving it, that it meets state standards. We don't accept the improvement.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to amend my recommendation to either have the financial guarantee or enter into the water contract and for the infrastructure to have those, I guess, inspected.
Constructed it before recordation.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that motion?
Michael York, I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Before we move on, Mr. Demus, I need to clarify if I got all those items since I had some notes mixed up here on mine. Items 2 through 13, do I have an approval on the motion for?
Kat is shaking her head. I mean, there's number 7.
Yeah, I think that's the one I left out. Okay.
Well, 14's on the public, on the other
Correct.
section, so we're not there. But 7 is still out there.
And I thought so. All right, so moving on to item number 7, can I have a motion to approve this as presented, please?
So moved, Michael York.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Miller, a second.
From Commissioner Ball. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 14, the public hearing items. Thank you.
All right, we're making progress. So item 14 is a time extension. The reason these time extensions are on the, not as part of the consent agenda, just because at their length of requests. Oh, let me switch back to the agenda. I apologize. So let's scroll down to the regular public hearing, non-consent portion. So item 14, this is their 5th request for Park Springs IHS Block 1, lots 1 through 3, a final 3.87 acres. Item number 15, this is the 4th request for Padre Harbor Unit 3, a final of 60.9 acres. And item number 16 is the 4th request for Padre Harbor Unit 2, a final of 25.24 acres. Again, we as staff, because they're getting a little bit out there in the number of requests, so we don't really have a recommendation as to say approval or denial, but we did want to leave it in the hands of the Planning Commission, either to ask questions or if you feel comfortable approving another extension. I can tell you on Park Springs IHS, what we put in the memo is at 5, at 6 months apiece, we're saying this is the last one we as staff are probably going to be comfortable with. We wouldn't advocate for any future time extensions. Of course, the applicant has every right to continue to apply for them, but it's getting to the point that, 5 is quite a few. So this is probably the last one that staff would feel comfortable with. The other for 3 and 4 for Padre Harbor, these are involving the construction of the Park Road 22 bridge, according to the applicant. So that is why they're continuing to request. I believe the representative from Urban Engineering, Mr. Galavan, is on the line if you have questions of him. But that is the rationale that was given to us, that because of the ongoing construction of that bridge, it is delaying the completion of these 2 plats. Before we muddy the water, I don't want to lose anyone. So any questions specific to time extensions? Okay, hearing none, I'll keep moving down the agenda. The next one is a new plat with a variance. This is Padre Island, Corpus Christi, section number 4, block 191, lots 7A, 7B, and 7C. This is in a replat of 2337 acres. This does have, I'll go through a PowerPoint quickly on the request for a sidewalk waiver. So I'm going to switch screens to that request. Okay, so if everybody should be able to see the screen, this is again a request for a sidewalk waiver at 226 Cruiser Street. As you can see, the subject property is on the screen. Moving down a little bit further, on Long Whitecap, there is a sidewalk network established by the yellow line. There is no sidewalk along Park Road 22, which does make sense. That is the TxDOT right of way. But again, along Whitecap, there is sidewalk. Here is a view of the subject property on the left-hand side of the screen. Of course, you can see the sidewalk I just mentioned is a tied sidewalk along Whitecap. And here is the subject property. Here is another view of the subject property. And here is a third view from Cruiser. So here's the submitted plat that specifically is part of this request. And of course, through any plat we look at, there is public improvement requirements that's requiring the addition of sidewalks along Cruiser. Of course, as we always state, corner lots are extremely important as they are the foundation for building the network. Also, we have some slides here indicating of how shared driveways are not a means of stopping sidewalk development. Here's an example along Oso Parkway in which shared driveways actually have incorporated their sidewalks as part of their development. So the option we feel as staff is still available to continue that sidewalk network. So again, showing some of those examples, we as staff are recommending denial of the waiver from sidewalk construction. And of course, we're always available for answering any questions. Planning Commission may choose to follow or decline staff's recommendation, and you have the option to either approve the request, approve with conditions, or deny the waiver. And with that, I'd be more than happy to address any comments or concerns.
Thank you. At this time, are there any comments for staff and Planning Commission?
This is Commissioner Schrader. I want to make sure I understood. Are they asking for a waiver to not reconstruct the sidewalk after curb cuts are made? Or is the waiver being requested just for the Cruiser side street?
Correct. So there is existing sidewalk along Whitecap. Of course, we wouldn't want a curb cut along Whitecap because that the high rate of traffic.
Yeah.
This is a request to abstain or absolve the builder from constructing sidewalks along Cruiser, continuing the network.
And what is the rationale? Because there is not other sidewalks down the way.
Correct. Essentially, the comment is, a sidewalk to nowhere, but the idea is, again, as I've always said, corners establish the network, so it's an opportunity.
Okay.
Andrew,
And
do you have a slide that shows?
may I speak on that? I'm the person requesting the variance.
I will open the public hearing shortly. I will open the public hearing portion shortly. Right now, it's just staff and the Planning Commission commenting. Thank you. Commissioner York.
Thank you. Andrew, do you have a slide? I wanted to see how many of the properties along this portion of Cruiser Street are currently undeveloped. In other words, what are the chances that sidewalk actually gets built anywhere else?
So we do have on the screen, you have the subject property is in the lower left-hand corner. You do have a house next door. There is a vacant lot above that. There is 2 built lots. Now, these appear to already be platted lots, which I think is kind of the point you're trying to make of, unless a replat or something is going to occur in the future. Now, the fact that they're zoned, I believe they're zoned RMAT off the top of my head, you can have townhouse development. So that does not close the door on future replats in which they may want to subdivide the lots further for those kind of pie slice type of townhouse style, which you see the very next property next door. So I don't want to close and say these lots will never replat, because that wouldn't be a fair statement. A future developer could come in and replat along this Cruiser Street corridor and would have to go through this exact same process of stating, why they do not want to build sidewalks. So it's almost, I don't want to sound like this is dire straits, but if you close the door on the corner, you're almost closing the door on the neighborhood, because the argument will be by future developers, the network doesn't start anywhere. So therefore I don't need to put in my piece, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Andrew.
Any other comments for staff before I open the public hearing?
Yes, sir.
All
So
right,
we did receive, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, we did receive one public comment. If we're going into that phase, if you're opening the public hearing,
Yes,
as soon as you open it, I'd like to read one comment to record, and then Mr. Pope will have his chance to state his case, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the public hearing, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for the record, this one public comment was received by Nadine Havman. She resides at 15229 Cruiser, and she includes the following note in opposition of the proposed plat. And she states, I oppose too many wrecks at this dangerous corner, too crowded already, too small lot for adding more families. What are y'all thinking? Do not advise this. She lives across the street, and then she has a series of no's at the bottom of the note. But that is her statement, obviously in opposition of this replat. And that is the only public comment for this case, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Pope, any comments from you, sir?
Let's see, he may have muted. Let me make sure he's unmuted. Mr. Pope, can you hear us?
Yeah, yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, and I wanted to clarify something. I thought that this was also the meeting where, is this the meeting where it'll be just that our property will be officially replatted or not replatted? Or is this just based? Okay, but we just happen to only be speaking about the sidewalk, but it's going to be replatted today, correct?
So to kind of break down and this is actually a perfect kind of training opportunity. The replat is conditioned upon the approval of the waiver, meaning public improvements of a sidewalk is required as a condition of the plat. If the planning commission chooses to, let's say, approve the waiver, then the plat would move forward as normal. If the planning commission chooses to deny the waiver, your plat could still be continued to be approved, but it would be with the comment that you must construct the sidewalk. So one leads into the other.
So no matter what, we're going to get the replat. Whether or not we're going to put a sidewalk in along the one.
That's a perfectly simplified way to explain it.
Well, yes, and to be honest, I love the idea of sidewalks. I wish that there were sidewalks on Padre Island so that my little 4-year-old that just has her birthday today on St. Patrick's Day could ride her bike down the sidewalk. But, that ship has sailed back in the 70s and 80s. And but anyway, yeah, the city was wonderful and put that sidewalk all along Whitecap, which is a great. But yeah, I mean, so, and then I'm going to have a curb cut, to attach my 3 2-bedroom units to, which is going to be right there. So, putting a sidewalk in on that section would be, it wouldn't, to me, it doesn't really matter one way or the other, because you're just going to put a little bit more sidewalk where you already have a 30-foot driveway to access the property. But yeah, the next door property is already built and developed, and so it would just dead into that property, and then lead to just sticker burrs. So it would kind of just dead end right there. I guess that's my only comment. I guess so. So it's not going to matter if I could speak on behalf of the woman that lives. Well, I can't speak on her behalf, but yeah, that woman that lives across the street. I met with her, and she is a woman that just would rather not see anything built there, I guess. But obviously, it's a vacant lot that's going to get developed, and we're going to put something beautiful there, with a sidewalk or without one.
Great. Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
Done.
I appreciate it. Happy birthday to your daughter, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
At this time, I will close the public hearing and entertain conversations or motions. Just for the record, this time, Commissioner Salazar Garza will be abstaining from item 14.
Yeah, this is Michael York. I've got a comment / maybe a question. This seems to be coming up more and more often with lots that are in an existing developed subdivision with curb and gutter street, mostly here on the island, where sidewalk is then being required. It seems like the waivers are getting denied more and more. I know we've previously talked about doing the cash in lieu of, which I still think is something that should get done at some point in the future. But one thing I've noticed, I've had a couple of clients and have some plats coming up in the near future on Padre Island that this will affect. But what I've noticed is that the sidewalk, when it's being required, in some cases the developer even is fine with the sidewalk, but it becomes a burden for them to have to construct it before the plat can record, or they have to go get a deferment agreement, which costs more time and money. I wonder if there is an alternative way that we can defer this and put a requirement of, attach it to the building permit somehow, so that obviously it's easier and cheaper on the developer to do it all at the same time. Is there an option for us to do that somehow, similar to what we did on this Gemini plat, and just attach it as a condition to the building permit?
At this point, it's we don't have a door number 3. So door number 1 is construct, door number 2 is deferment agreement, door number 3 would be hopefully a future UDC text amendment. I would like to give a cheap plug that City Council approved our recent UDC text amendments, which does include a sidewalk waiver portion that we can handle in-house. So I anticipate we're going to see fewer sidewalk waivers, things that we can handle ourselves, rather than having to bring every single one of them to you. But 2, we're just not at the point of and I completely agree with the fee in lieu of construction. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think that's going to get rolled into the bigger addressing of Article 8 of UDC as far as our upcoming text amendment cycle. So I know we're going to get there. I just don't have a time frame, and I'm not talking 5 years in the future. We're going to get there soon. It's just I don't know when exact that date will be. So
and Michael, this is Al Raymond. We are putting out an RFQ for basically for Section 8 of the UDC. And I totally agree. Nina and I had talked about this before in terms of some of these kinds of things, these deferment agreements can be part of the building permit process, because we would simply just fold the C of O until you do whatever it is you would promise to do. So it's something that's going to happen soon. Hopefully we'll have a consultant under engaged, say by, I don't know, June, probably July. And it's something we'll be working toward as we close out this year. So, and of course, much like the previous UDC text amendments, there will certainly be a very involved public process, but it's something that's relatively close, and we'll certainly keep this in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Any other comments, or do I hear a motion?
This is Commissioner Schrader. I'll make one comment in regard to this, because I know that this, particularly on the island, this continues to come up as that all of this. I'm amazed at how little sidewalk is on the island in one of the places that is probably the most likely place that people would use them, because you have visitors that are walking to businesses and such in the area and things like that. But anyway, I do believe that there's additional value on a corner lot like this, even though it technically goes to nowhere, being that people who are using the sidewalk down Whitecap, if they are turning onto that street, don't have to step out in the street, as an approaching vehicle may also be turning at the same time. So even though it, again, to nowhere, I do believe it has some value to allow people to transition as they make the corner. So I guess I'll make a motion that we deny the waiver as required that the sidewalk be installed. And I appreciate the applicant's understanding that this is not a major issue to them. I do understand that it's somewhat of a burden because of the timing nature of this, and hope we get these issues sorted out better. But I do think it has some value, so I make the motion that we deny the waiver and require sidewalk be put in place.
Thank you. So for item 18, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Can I speak on that?
Well, Andrew, I'll open up the public hearing one more time for the applicant's comment. Go ahead, Mr. Pope.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like I said, I wish there were sidewalks everywhere. And I guess I want to just make sure that everyone that votes on this motion or whatever is aware that this is, and I mean, and I like that idea where, you don't give everybody waivers on it, when you're developing new properties, especially commercial properties, like the new grocery store that went in has a sidewalk. And that does have some potential for whenever they develop the other sides of that. Well, one side is the middle school seashore, so, but, maybe in the future they'd want to add on, but they instead put in a little connector there with some steps, which is great. But, the other way going towards Whitecap, that'd be great to have a sidewalk there. In this particular subdivision where I'm building, I mean, it is going to dead right into an existing structure. So unless for some reason the person that owns that house decides that they want to carry on a sidewalk over across to their one lot, and then the people next to them do it, whenever they develop theirs, yeah, it could maybe
Mr. Pope, and we've heard those comments earlier, so I'm gonna if you have anything new, great, but we've already heard those comments, so I'm gonna ask that we move forward with the comments you made earlier regarding the sidewalk to that developed lot.
And Mr. Chairman, just as a quick point of information, I'm assuming you meant to lump in numbers 17 and 18. So the plat, essentially a motion of approving.
That is correct. Upon the conditional, yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay,
so this time I will reclose the public hearing, and that is correct. So it is a motion for 17 and 18. And yes, we have a motion on the table.
You said, do I have anything new? I guess yes. My motion,
Mr. Pope, at this time I have closed the public hearing portion of it. We're going to proceed with a motion of 17 and 18 with a denial of the waiver. So do I have a second from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Mandel, I second that.
At this time, I will. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on, do I have a motion for item 14 with Salazar Garza abstaining?
This is Commissioner Miller. I move that we approve item 14 as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to items 15 and 16. Do I have a motion for those two items, please?
Michael York, I move we approve items 15 and 16.
Thank you. At this time, do I have a second?
Mr. Mandel, second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion 15 and 16 passes. Moving on to item 19 under new zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to item 19, which is the Brazelton Development Company, the case 0121-01, located at 7601 Yorktown. This is a request from the RS 4.5 district and the FR Farm Rural District to the RS 4.5/PUD, which is a single family residential district with a planned unit development. So as you'll see on the screen, I'll quickly go through the presentation. The subject property is located on the south side of Yorktown Boulevard, and that is east of Rodfield Road. Here is a closer view of the subject property. Now, as far as adjacent development and zoning pattern, As you can see, the surrounding properties are also zoned predominantly RS 4.5 over the last decade, going back as far as 2004. We do have one PUD in the neighborhood, also with the similar zoning RS 4.5 done back in 2013. The white areas signify vacant properties that are yet to develop. But on future land use, it is also to be medium density residential. So, okay, so moving on to utilities, as far as all available utilities can service the subject property. So all points are covered there. As far as UDC requirements, as the property is adjacent on both sides to other RS 4.5 zoning, no type of buffer yard is required. Of course, you're familiar with this side, the standard setbacks of 20 feet in the front, street, I should say, and sides and rear 5, minimum parking is 2 per unit, and then all of our favored uses that are allowed in the single family district, which are either single family homes themselves, churches, schools, etc., places of worship. Of the 93 notices sent out, we received 0 in favor and 0 in opposition. Now, as far as getting into the nuts and bolts of the PUD itself, the specific deviations, as you'll see listed on the table, apply to minimum lot width, which is shrinking from 45 to 40, minimum lot area, which is shrinking from 4,500 to 3,900, sidewalks, which instead of, I know we're discussing sidewalks right now, but as you can see, sidewalks, instead of 5 feet on both sides of the street, they are proposing a sidewalk on 4 feet on one specific side of certain streets. And when I say that, I mean based on their master site plan, they do list which streets will have one sidewalk on that particular side. I can tell you every single street minus the service alleys do have sidewalks in one shape or form along them. And then lastly, the right-of-way width, instead of our standard 50 feet, which is typical, it is 35 feet is their request. Now, as you can see on the PUD concept, and I would like to give a lot of credit to the developer because we had a very good meeting. Mr. Brazelton, as far as meeting, and his engineer, Mr. Hudson, meeting with city staff, specifically from solid waste, from fire, and from traffic engineering, and working out this great plan, which provides the ability for fire trucks to navigate the property, for solid waste trucks to navigate the property, and eliminating the need for them to reverse. So I give them all the credit in the world for sitting down with us and coming up with a plan that works for everyone. But as you can see, the layout, there are service alleys to the north, or I should say that would be the northwest, that will allow those turnaround areas and the ability for public service vehicles to navigate. And as you can see, there are no, you'll never need your reverse lights. You can always pull forward in this design. Based on all of that information, staff is recommending approval of the plan unit development along with the RS 4.5 base zoning. Are there any questions? And I'd be more than happy to address them.
Thank you. At this time, does the Planning Commission have any questions for staff regarding item 19?
This is Commissioner Schrader. Mr. Demas, this I couldn't tell from this. I don't think there's a section through this, but how does this deal with the on previous ones of these that we've dealt with, the issue had come up of, where you don't, the side that you don't have the sidewalk, is there enough room for the vehicles to truly be in the property and not overhang onto the street, potentially creating more issues with getting, a large service vehicle access or bypassing those vehicles? And then with this narrowed width, how is it dealt with as far as people parking on the street?
And that's an excellent question. Those are pretty much the highlights of the other half of the meeting that we had between the developer and city staff. And that is why I'm encouraging more members of our internal technical review committee to take as high of an active role as possible, because that is how we solve those issues before it gets to hearing before the Planning Commission. So I say all of that to say the paved street section, which is the 28-foot back-to-back section, is remaining. They are not requesting any deviation of that, and that is a standard street section that you will see almost on any local street throughout the city. Now, good, bad, or indifferent on whether or not in the future that needs to be re-examined, that is a whole other conversation. But that being said, they are not proposing any deviation to the pavement street section. So if you have a car parked on one side, maybe two, the public service vehicle is not going to encounter any more trouble than they normally would on any other local street. So that's not absolving anyone to park recklessly, but it is the reality of our built environment. Two, as far as navigation is concerned, the on-street parking, of course, can still happen. Off-street parking spaces, which we encountered on some other PUDs in the past, the applicant is not requesting any reduction on the front street yard setback, meaning the houses and the garages still need to be set at 20 feet, which is a good number to prevent any type of overhang into the right of way or onto the side that has a potential sidewalk. So they've addressed that issue. So I think that covered all of your questions about navigation, public service vehicles, and any potential overhangs.
Okay, so so on the side without a sidewalk, essentially you have the 20 feet and then you're there. You're at the street, correct?
Well, I believe on the design, in some cases, the street was a little bit offset, but no matter what, a vehicle will not overhang into the right of way is the key point I want to hit home.
Okay.
Sheldon, this is Michael York. If you look at the street sections, the side without a sidewalk, it looks like there's a 20-foot setback, and then there's 1 foot between the property line and the back of curb.
Yes. Yeah, okay. That was just, it was hard to see exactly what that, yes, and I'm looking a little closer at that now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for staff regarding item 19? At this time, I will open the public hearing for item 19. Any comments, Andrew?
No, sir. On this particular item, no public comments were received.
Thank you. At this time, we will close the public hearing portion of item 19 and entertain a motion or further discussion.
This is Michael York. I move we approve item 19 as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Commissioner Schrader, I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to items 20 and 21, both have been requested to be tabled. Andrew, do you want to read through those since we've already presented them?
Yes, sir. If the planning commissioners would indulge me, I would like to do at least a quick presentation, at a minimum, open the public hearing. This will save us having to repost, send out notices all over again. I would really hope to read all of the public comment. I know it's a little bit of public comments on this in the very next case, so get comfortable, but I would rather read them into the record now and then gloss over them and kind of, what's the word? Remind everyone at the next planning commission hearing. They're asking to table until April 14th. So on the 14th, my plan would be to go over the comments again, not have to read them all over again, but at least give you the highlights at that point. But I do, for full transparency, would like to read them into the record tonight.
And that's fine. So item 20 was being tabled, requested to be tabled to the 14th of April, and the item 21 was March 31st. So
yes, sir, that's correct.
Read item 20 and 21, and I'll open the public hearing.
Yes, so I'll briefly go over item number 20, at least the highlights, so I won't go too far into depth on the presentation, and then once we open the public hearing, I'll read all of those comments. So just very quickly, the item before you tonight, which again, the applicant has requested the table to April 14th, is a request from the FR district to the RS6 with also a planned unit development. Here is a zoom in on the subject property. This is at the corner of Ametrine Drive and Slough Road. And of course, Slough Road dead ends into, I believe, part of the OSO and originates at Rodfield Road. So here is kind of a wider zoning pattern view showing the various single family developments. The highlights on this particular development is as submitted today, it is I believe a 13 unit single family townhouse development. And I'll show you the master site plan in just a second. So these are not apartments. These are not any type of rental. These are, for all intents and purposes, single family homes. Now, that being said, I'll go ahead and pass this slide. There are available utilities in the area. Now, this is the key slide. Of the 41 notices sent out, we received 16 thus far in opposition, which constitutes almost 25%. And we received an additional 11 notices from outside of the ring. So outside the blue line, we received another 11 notices also in opposition. Now, I won't spend too much time on this master site plan on deviations, and I'll say that the developer is currently working on a redesign to address some of our comments that originated with the TRC. So if you read through your zoning packet, which I'm sure all of you did your homework, you'll see that there were several items highlighted that said, we would like the construction of a sidewalk. We would like the street to meet minimum street standards as far as the width of the right-of-way. The applicant is going to address those comments, and that is why they're asking for an extra month to go over them. So I won't want to bore you with the details on this one, as these are probably all going to change. But that being said, the highlights of why we are opposing as submitted today is because it does not quite meet the review criteria of the UDC as far as what a PUD is supposed to do. A PUD is supposed to provide a variety of housing options, at least increase some form of mobility or walkability. Second, as I just mentioned on the previous PUD, we take very seriously the ability for public service vehicles to navigate on the site, and having a narrower right of way as on this original submittal, it's just a little bit too tight. That if you do have that one kind of road person that parks on the street and inspires others to do the same, now you cannot be serviced by not only solid waste, but God forbid, in the event of emergency, that vehicle may not be able to make its way down the street. So that is why at this point we are recommending denial. Now, again, I say that with an asterisk that might change by the time we come back to you in April as we re-review what the applicant has to say on redesign, and give the technical review committee members that had a little bit of heartburn a chance to re-review that redesign.
Thank you. At this time, do we have any questions for staff regarding item 20? If not, I will open the public comment. Any comments?
Yes, so I'll go over and again, I'll just go through those fairly quickly that were received. So first things first, we received just a simple checkbox from Ms. Birch. These first that I'm going to go through as far as public comments are all within the 200-foot circle. So first and foremost, these are those that are counting towards that 25%. So she is in opposition. Another is from Mr. Cantu, who is just simply saying they are opposed to the creation of townhomes pursuant to this case. They would recommend a park instead. Number 3 is from Mr. Braxton, who also lists from the planning commission papers being circulated, appears that a vacant lot behind our home is being planned to have townhomes built. The area is congested. To build townhomes, they would have to be 2-story. If the project calls for 2-story townhomes, they disapprove of the rezoning. A 2-story project will infringe on the privacy of our backyards. The next comment states from Ms. Garza, or Mrs. Garza, I should say, opposition specifically for traffic, privacy, and property values. The next one is opposing the rezoning and creation of townhomes from Mr. Chapa. Again, these are all within the 200-foot notification area. The next comment is from Miss Rhodes, I'm sorry, as a property owner within the La Brisa subdivision, I'm opposed to the old Slough Road farm being rezoned to a townhouse dwelling. This correspondence was mailed towards the latter portion of the breeze. She included a few personal details, so I'll skip over those. Just recently received this one yesterday from Mrs. Bego, also in opposition. Lowering property values, increased traffic, and privacy issues are her main concerns. Next is from a Miss Boardman, who is in opposition and has simply checked the box in opposition. Further down from Mr. and Mrs. Yalia, it says we do not want 2 or more story dwellings behind our backyard. We bought our homes with the privacy of farmland behind us. Thank you, in opposition. Next is a Mr. Torres, also in opposition. Lastly, coming up on a few more, Ms. Garza, also in opposition. This is from Mr. Beverly, also in opposition, just one sentence in opposition. Next is a Miss Hoff. I would hate to have more traffic in our neighborhood and lose my backyard privacy if they build 2-story townhomes, also opposition. Next is a Miss Mazur, also in opposition. So that concludes those within the 200 feet that constitute that 25%. Again, for the sake of transparency, I'll quickly go over those that are outside. There's only a few pages on this one. And this says from a Mr. Barker, opposed to the rezoning. Vote no for the rezoning from Ms. Cavazos. I oppose townhomes. This one's a little bit longer from a Mr. and Mrs. Clark. I'm a resident of Corpus Christi and we have a home in South Lake Estates off Slough Road. Though I'm not within the 200-foot notification area, as for the zoning case, our home is just another 200 feet away. My wife and I strongly oppose the current proposed townhome project. It does represent surrounding properties on all sides and the proposed side anywhere near this location. While we encourage single-family residential home development on this parcel, similar in quality and construction of the immediate neighborhood on all sides, the townhome project does not belong in the area as it is undesirable. Next was submitted from Mr. Garcia, strongly having this property rezoned for townhomes. These are residential neighborhoods with homes. Townhomes are typically rentals with increased traffic and varying tenants. Next is a Mr. Heidegard. I'm opposed to the strongest possible terms to the rezoning case. Our community is organizing. We will ensure the city is held responsible for unwise decisions that affect our neighborhood negatively by loosening restrictions on building height, increased vehicle traffic, and increasing population density. It's a nice letter. So moving on to Mr. Porsche. I'm writing this to notify you that I am wholeheartedly against this change in zoning. The area is already zoned for single family, and the far majority of homeowners in this area want it to stay that way. Next is from a Mr. and Mrs. Rivera. I oppose the rezoning and the creation of townhomes pursuant to this case. While I do not live in the marked area, I live adjacent to the proposed project and object to the building. I think it means rezoning being proposed. The next is from a Mr. Rye, which one sentence, I oppose the rezoning. Next is from a Ms. Smith. I live in the neighborhood behind Slough where you want to build townhomes. I personally do not want townhomes there. Moving further, this one's quite a bit of a read, but this is from a Miss Stevens. So if you'll kind of follow along with me, I'm writing on behalf of my family that last year ago purchased a beautiful home at 3805 Los Arroyos. We've been informed that someone is trying to rezone the corner of Ametrine and Slough in our quiet, beautiful neighborhood for a condo build. I'm writing today to plead and beg those in control of approving the rezoning not to allow the condo development to be placed right in the middle of our neighborhood. We worked so hard to, in fact, we've attached this to your report, so you have this printed out. I won't bore reading this to you, but I'm reading into the record that Ms. Stevens, who lives outside of the opposition notice area, I should say notice area, is opposed to this rezoning. Next is from Mr. Bassi, which also objects to the rezoning, has a few sentences about it, opposing townhouse development. And that concludes all of the, which I'm sure will grow in the time between now and then, but opposition letters that have been sent in thus far regarding the zoning case as submitted. I just want to make clear it's as submitted today.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other public comments for that item, Andrew? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion to table this item to the April 14th meeting.
Hey, this is Michael York. Just a quick question on that. The for Andrew or staff, I guess, the folks that had opposition to these cases, especially the one, when it goes back and they make changes to a PUD, do those people get resent? The update or the changes?
They will. Thanks, Commissioner York. Though, to answer your question, they will not get another notice. However, I give all the credit in the world to the neighborhood. They're staying pretty active in communicating with us as staff. As soon as this case posts to the website, as far as your packet, we can then refer them to that link so they can download the packet, review it, and then reassess if they still have opposition. But I think in the meantime, I'm going to send all of these opposition letters to the applicant and ask them to reach out to these members of the community So essentially, if they can head them off at the pass and say, this is our new redesign, send us an email so we can mass distribute our new redesign, that may alleviate some of these oppositional letters from proceeding forward. But that's the advice I've given to the applicant thus far, and I'm going to continue down that path.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, do I have a motion to table this to the April 14th meeting?
Commissioner Schrader, I make a motion that we table this to April 14th Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Michael York, second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to item 21, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So very similarly, I'll go through the PowerPoint quickly and give you the highlights. And then there was only, fortunately, a few public comments on this particular zoning case. So let's see, bring up the PowerPoint here. As you can see, the subject property is just south. If we all know where the Walmart is in Flower Bluff. So it's the adjacent property to the south, located at the corner of Flower Bluff and essentially Compton Road if it were to cross the street. So here's a closer view of the subject property. This is a split zoning request, meaning the 4 acres, as you can see on the screen, is being requested for the CG2 General Commercial District, and the rear 34 acres and some change is being requested for the RM2 zoning district, which is multifamily. Now, looking at the zoning pattern, we have various instances of commercial development and apartment development, multifamily, I should say, along the SPID corridor. To the south, and of course to the east, we have low density single family homes, which are the 1 acre RE, and in some cases you have a few pockets of RS6 dating back to the 70s. To the south of the subject property. Of course, to the west is all the OSO, so there's no adjoining western neighbor. Now, the key things I wanted to bring up just briefly, as you got time to kind of marinate on this for the next 2 weeks, is while this is not in the APZ, so to make it absolutely clear, this property is not within the boundaries of the APZ. At its closest, so at this point here, it is a 60-foot difference according to our GIS map, which is again an approximation. But 60 feet at its closest and 500 feet at its greatest. So we're talking about a development that is requesting more than, I believe on their actual number given on the land development, land use statement is between 500 and 600 apartment units. So again, 500 to 600 apartment units within a couple hundred feet of the accident potential zone. So I'm not going to speak for the Navy. I'm sure if Mr. Pollock is still with us on the line, he will provide his sentiments or his feelings about it. But I can, as I always paraphrase him when I say, you know, there's no paint lines in the sky like you have on your highways and on your freeways to where you know where to stay in the lines. Those don't exist in the sky. So pilots do not know to stay within certain boundaries and not. If you have a flight that goes over it and God forbid there is an issue, it could land among now potentially 500 apartments. So moving along to the next slide, we have UDC amendments, requirements as far as buffer yards. To the south, you would have some buffer yards along the CG2, to the north along the CG2, to the south along the RE, there would also be buffer yard requirements. There are different setbacks, of course, between the general commercial zoning district along Flower Bluff Drive and the remainder. And of course, the standard uses allowed among each district, respectively. As far as utilities are concerned, all utilities are available to the subject property to service. Of the 34 notices sent out, and this is as of today, we received 3 in opposition, which is roughly 5%, and 2 in favor. Now, the staff is currently recommending denial of the change of zoning. The 2 key tenant points are: 1, the proposal is inconsistent with the future land use map, which calls for low density residential subdivision. And by virtue, that means it is inconsistent with the Flower Bluff Area Development Plan as well as Plan CC as a whole. Number 2, that proximity to the ACUs, well, yes, technically the property is not within that boundary. That amount is significant amount of density when it comes to multifamily development could pose a hazard being that close to that ACUs boundary. Now, I know the ACUs map is still under draft, and I'm not sure if Mr. Pollack might address that. I don't, in our conversations, there's not any type of idea that that boundary could expand, but that is still, again, going to go through the public hearing process. So I'm sure he may have a few comments that also alluding to the status of the ACUs draft. But as it stands today, we are recommending denial. And again, the applicant is requesting tabling to the 3/31 Planning Commission hearing.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any questions for staff regarding item 21?
Mr. Demas, this is Mr. Schrader. Presuming this is tabled, I would be interested to know when this comes back up, the developments that are directly across SPID are apartment home developments that are in the ACUs, level 2 anyway. What's the density for those?
So RM1 will allow a maximum of 20 units per acre. I'm sorry, 22 units per acre. I would want to throw in a little, I'm a history nerd, so I would want to say when I've studied the history of the ACUs was not adopted in any form or fashion in the area of Truax Field, which is the other name for Corpus International, until 1985. So with this zoning change happening in 83, it predates even the existence of ACUs as a tool in our planner toolbox.
Okay.
Hey, any other questions for staff?
This is Ben Pollock from the Navy. No, for Commissioner Schroeder, that's correct. I mean, the areas that you're talking about over there and a lot of the other numerous areas that are under the accident potential zone grandfathered in due to that. If you look at all the years of all those properties located around the base, 1986 is when the actual AQs came out. And even when it came out, probably wasn't enforced to the nature that it should have been up until the recent years. So Mr. Demas is correct on that. So those properties that are already there are actually grandfathered.
Mr. Pollock, in regards to things like when we have this amount of density or this amount of potential people in proximity to the boundary, I guess, like for instance, the issue with the school, and they moved that just outside of the boundary. Is that still seen as kind of not the ideal solution either? Because again, it's the proximity of so many people. How do you all look at that?
Yeah, I think Mr. Demas hit the nail on the head, is that although it is outside of the actual overlay of the accident potential zone, we are training student pilots that do not always stay within those confines. So therefore there is spill out. Even though we're close to it, the neighborhoods can be subjected to, overflight, noise levels, and like you said, the potential of a crash. And I will tell you, this one is actually today, about 2 hours before the commission met tonight, I was able to get the final draft of the technical review of the noise study that was conducted for Truax Field. As everybody's aware, there's going to be a new AQs update for Waldron and Cabinets. Due to budget limitations, we were only able to do a noise study at Truax Field by itself. In the future, we will be updating the AQs on there as well. But after reviewing the final draft, I did notice that there were direct flight paths over this subject property. Some of them could be determined based off of the runway 1836 pattern at that time, depending on how many type of aircraft were in the pattern. They may or may not be going over this area multiple times. And also, too, the transition from the Waldron Airfield back to Truex Airfield shows some of the flight path that would go over this subject property. So that does concern me. And, you know, luckily I was able to review that today based off of the new noise technical review that will be coming out soon when the other new AQs are published for the other airports.
Thank you. Any other comments for staff? Andrew, at this time, I will open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just flipping screens back to, so we only have a quick handful of opposition letters that we received. The first is from Mr. Cass that is within the 200-foot circle, and attached a letter which was part of your packet that went out, but it essentially paraphrased to say that he is listing various reasons why he is opposed to this change of zoning, and includes items like a high pressure gas line. There is other areas that are more appropriate for this type of development in his opinion. Moving on to Mr. Horn, who is, or I should say his first name is Todd Horn. He is in favor of the change of zoning. And Mr. Acuna is in opposition, did not submit any type of further comment. Okay, the next one from Paul Keller Investments is simply checking in favor. And the last two are outside of the 200-foot notification area, but we treat them all the same as far as we do read them into the record. And again, the paraphrasing is that Ms. Kilgore feels that it is in conflict with the Navy and brings up the issue with CCISD, also the noise from direct flights overhead and the potential hazard of those flights. And then the final comment from Ms. Wrights, and she states that she is sending an email to, she has just purchased Mr. Adame's home on Graham Road, again, outside of the notification area, but would like to say that she is opposed. She gives a little bit of background about herself, but she is opposed to the large apartment complex. She feels that there is also an impact to Oso Bay and the wetlands that border upon it. And again, this will be redistributed when we post the packet again if you would like to read into detail. But nevertheless, she is opposed to the change of zoning. And that concludes the public comments submitted for this zoning case thus far. Are there any further questions on this particular zoning case?
I was on mute. Are there any other comments? If not, I will close the public hearing and request an item or request a motion for this item.
Mr. Demas, we're actually a neighbor to that subject property. Can I discuss? Can I be in support of it, or is that?
No, you can. I will open the public hearing. I was asking. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. You know, we're neighbors to that property as well. We're Strategic Investment Solutions and own 3 acres in proximity, and we're in support of it.
Thank you, sir.
It's an adjacent property. It falls within 200 feet.
Andrew, do you need his contact information or make a note of that, please?
Yes, if the caller in user 3, if you would be more than happy to, or if you could please give me a call tomorrow or shoot me an email, I can give you my email address just so I can have you noted on which portion of the property that you own so I can reflect it in the percentages that you are in favor.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Are there any other comments at this time? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing and I will entertain a motion for item 21. It has been requested a table to the March 31st meeting.
Michael York, I move we table the item to the March 31st meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Commissioner Salazar Garza. I second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. At this time, we're moving on to the director's report. Anything to report?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Give me a second to bring up the code adoption schedule. Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. Al Raymond, Director of Development Services. I wanted to brief this body on the 2021 code adoption schedule that DSC has prepared and vetted, and I wanted to push it out to the community so that if you are asked, you are aware. You should be receiving this in email soon, if not already. But in effect, DSC wants to establish 7 technical review committees. They will consist of at least 1 DSC member and 1 construction trade advisory and appeals board committee member. I would like to limit the committees to no more than 10 participants. I think that's effective. A lot can get done. It's not too large. It's not too small. And the goal is really to minimize or reduce the number of local amendments and stay as close to the base code as possible. The committees are there before you. Number 1, the International Building Code, the International Existing Building Code. Al Raymond, myself, I'll be the DSC representative. The International Residential Code, our senior building inspector will be the DSC representative. The International Plumbing Code and the International Mechanical Code and the International Fuel Gas Code, William Whitcliffe. Our senior plumbing inspector will be the DSC representative there. The International Electrical Code, Frank Garza, our senior electrical inspector, will be the DSC representative there. The International Energy Conservation Code, Luke Fry, our deputy building official, will be the DSC representative on that committee. The International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, Mike Guerrero, our chief plans examiner, will be the DSC representative on that committee. And the International Fire Code, Michael Dice, assistant director, and the fire marshal will be the DSC representative and the fire representative on that committee. Scroll up a little bit, Andrew. The proposed schedule is as follows, right? On March 4th, DSC announced this and presented this schedule at a special CTAAB meeting on March 12th, which was last Friday, I think. DSC announced to the Development Service Task Force meeting, and we put out a call for review committee participants, right? We stated that in the month of March, we would like to brief the Planning Commission, which we're doing tonight, and we ultimately would like to brief City Council before this month is finished. On April 1st, 2021, there'll be a 30-day open period for an invitation to the public for TRC committee participants. We're going to post this on our website. We're going to put this on all our social media outlets. We're going to put this in the paper to try to reach as many people as possible that would be interested in participating in this effort. The invitation will close on April 3rd, beginning May 3rd. I'm sorry, on April 30th. Beginning May 3rd, 2021, we'll initiate meetings once a month with the TRC committees from 9 to noon. That means that all 7 committees will meet once a month. It doesn't have to be the same day, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same time, but if we can set aside one day that is amenable to all committee members and time period that is also agreeable to all committee members, we keep consistency that way. I think everyone will engage more. They know when it occurs. This will occur from the beginning of May to the end of October. That's 7 months. That's more than enough time to allow us to roll up our sleeves, to dig into the meat of the codes, to assess it, to review it, to evaluate it and then make, recommendations that are beneficial to the community. Beginning November 1st through November 30th, we're going to take those recommendations and post them online for public review and comment. In the month of December, which is not on here, DSD will take the TRC review recommendations and recommendations or comments made by the public, and engage the committee members if there need to be to finalize the ultimate documents and provide a draft of the 2021 codes with local amendments by the 1st of January 2022. That official draft of the 2021 codes with local amendments will be posted for a 30-day period for public notification. And hopefully March 2022, DSC will present the codes with local amendments to the Planning Commission, this body, and ultimately, hopefully in May 2022, DSC will present the 2021 codes with local amendments to City Council for adoption. Finally, I'd like to say, I know that all of you meet here every other Wednesday, but it would be great if some of you, if not all of you, could participate in this effort. Many of you have expertise in many different areas, and find a committee that suits you, and it would be great if you could participate or mention it to other colleagues that can add their expertise into developing a code with amendments that really move the city forward. That's my that's director's report for today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Great report. And we will, I guess, if anybody does want to join, do we just email Andrew for getting on the committees?
That's correct.
All right,
it officially opens on April, but hey, if anybody's eager to get on it, we'll certainly get you on now.
No problem. Thank you very much. Any items to be scheduled? I just have one comment. Are we going back to council chambers anytime soon?
Peter, this is Al Raymond. Peter Zanoni is still evaluating that, right? The optics would be, yes, relatively soon, since quote unquote Texas has reopened. But officially, as you know, and maybe many of you don't know, even though Texas is reopened, but the county and the city still require the same COVID protocols and procedures that we always, right? So, which is why we're still doing this meeting virtually. So that's still something that is still under discussion, and I assume that the city manager, along with the mayor and council, will make a decision very soon.
Thank you for that. Any other items from Planning Commission?
This is Commissioner Schrader. I just had one question for Director Raymond on the code thing. Do you know, Director, is the state planning to continue, or have they already adopted to continue their amendments that were adopted with the prior code related to like residential fire protection, things like that?
Right now, because it's the legislative session, there are several bills put forward that suggest that the state should adopt the 2018, right, and all that associated with it. As you know, currently, some of the codes that we follow that the state adopted is already at the 2018. So some bills have been put forth that suggest that the state should adopt the full 2018 international codes, building and residential.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. At this time, I will adjourn the Planning Commission and convene the Beach Dune Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Chairman Bob?
Here.
Vice Chairman Dibble?
Here.
Commissioner Christi?
Here.
Commissioner Larrabee? Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner York?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner Mandel?
Here.
and Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Here.
Quorum established.
Thank you. At this time, Andrew, are there any comments, public comments other than those pertaining to the agenda item?
So I'm going to, I do believe there are some public comments. I'm going to pass the baton to my wonderful colleague, Craig Garrison, who is going to walk you through his first BCC presentation. So,
thank you. Sounds great.
Take it away, Craig.
Good afternoon, Beach Dune Committee, and welcome to your first meeting of 2021. We do have an item on the consent agenda. It's case number 20BD 1002. This is a request for construction of a single-family dwelling located seaward of the 350-foot erosion setback line and 310 feet landward from the line of vegetation. And once again, this is on the consent agenda, and there has been some misconception because this item was previously tabled from the November 11th meeting, and the applicant has amended their request to remove a beach dune walkover that was previously included in the application. So now this is just a request for a single family home that encroaches 40 feet within the erosion response line. And so there is public comment that staff can read. And before public comment, are there any questions about this permit?
Planning Commission, do we have any comments for the item being presented?
Mr. Garrison, can you, I tried to look this up beforehand. I wasn't successful in understanding what I was looking at, but can you elaborate a little bit on the rule or the guideline that we're dealing with as far as this, I guess when we're talking about the recent storm damage has effectively established a new line? Is that what we're talking about here? Is it that the erosion line has moved because of the impact of the most recent storm?
Commissioner Schrader, that is correct. Due to Hurricane Hannah in late July, the joint erosion response plan, which is a joint plan with Nuisance County, City of Corpus Christi, and the General Land Office of the state, does have our line here. The line of vegetation is based off the end of the vegetation on the top of the last dune as you go towards the public beach. And at this portion of our beach, we did lose 40 feet of dune due to Hurricane Hannah. And so the way that this application's timeline worked is that the initial documents were drafted in February 2020, and then the applicant went through the dune protection permit process with the county in July of 2020, and then submitted to the city in September. Since the Hurricane Hannah happened in July, and with our concurrent state and city review, the state did request to have an updated site plan showing the line of vegetation moving. And so therefore our 350-foot erosion response line moved with it 40 feet as well. And what this did to the proposal was include 40 feet of the actual proposed residential structure. Hopefully that answered your question.
Well, so the erosion response line, does that effectively reset? I mean, once it's adopted, does that effectively reset the building line once approved, or what?
Yes, and just to be clear, the erosion response line, also known as our 350-foot building setback line, moves with our line of vegetation. And so what we'll typically see in our dunes over years when we have strong storms is you'll have the dune be wiped out for 20, 30, or sometimes 40 feet. And then over the years, the dunes will build back up again along with that vegetation. So that line will move along with our storm seasons.
Right. So every year you're potentially subject to being, I mean, in other words, if it's waived here, then are we, how do we deal with other applicants later when we waived it? What kind of precedent are we dealing with by?
Right, good question. So there is no there's no precedent for this, as the line will be changing season to season. And this home theoretically could actually be outside of the erosion response area a year or two from now, as the dunes revegetate. Or it could go the opposite direction, where the entire home is now within the erosion response area. And just to be clear, we did have a review with the state and Nueces County and city staff, and our department has approved the exemption of the home's encroachment into the erosion response area. It still has to go to this beach dune committee for approval, though. So it's kind of the cart before the horse situation.
Okay.
My comment is involved with the comments that I've got with the packet we received today. Are the removal, it appears, I didn't read every one all the way through, but it appears everybody's comment was about primarily the access to the beach. Is that addressing everybody's comments with that access being removed?
It did not address all comments, but that was the primary comment that staff received. I can definitely open up, or y'all can open up public comment, and staff can read through the comments. I guess further categories were environmental concerns, and also setting a precedent for homes to encroach into the erosion response line, and then also line of sight, kind of for the beauty corridor, as you will. All the comments that I did receive, or staff did receive, came from the adjacent Lost Colonies townhomes or houses, which are built there, and they're actually existing non-conforming or grandfathered into their current placement, which is well within that erosion response line.
Thank you. Are there any other comments at this time for staff? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing for item 22.
Okay, and first, I would like to read the comments that we do have, and I do know that we have some citizens waiting on WebEx to comment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Starting off, we do have a comment from a Miss Sherry Tregeisen. She does have a comment about ecosystems, and the ecosystem consists of several species of plants and the effect that this development would have. Also, the sand dunes do act as a protection to the development in this area, and so this development may not allow those dunes to it says they act as a resilient barrier to destructive forces of wind and waves. Then the last comment from Sherry is that there is a viable alternative, and she is referencing a portion of our joint erosion response plan where you need to have a viable alternative to the current proposed site of the home. All right, next comment is from a Gary Gonzalez. This is a written opposition to the application for a golf cart boardwalk and also the building setback exemption. His summary is that encroaching on building setbacks or placing a redundant boardwalk structure on above the sand dunes will impact the plant and animal ecosystem in addition to adjacent property and their ownership. There's no evidence of a hardship scenario justifying an exemption for the building setback. Regarding the boardwalk, there is a viable, indeed responsible option for the boardwalk that is aligned with the spirit of environmental conservancy and the safeguard that is incumbent upon us to practice as stewards of our natural resources. Next comment comes from Cindy and Joe Abel. And they do have as their reason is failure to evaluate dune impact and the adjacent homes. And next comment comes from Elisa Tinsley. It says, I'm a homeowner and live in the Lost Colony community number 13, and I'm very concerned by the proposed golf cart boardwalk on the south side of our property. There's already a boardwalk, and she continues about the boardwalk, which is now removed. does say after the recent storms, the impact of flooding on the dunes has been substantial. I am concerned that this structure will have negative impact and cause more flooding directly affecting our homes. Next comment comes from a Christi L. Reed. Says I am a homeowner in Lost Colony. And she does comment the Boardwalk does mention that Hurricane Hannah dramatically changed the dunes and beach on Mustang Island, a major ecological impact to our local environment. It is totally irresponsible to proceed with the golf cart boardwalk. We do have a Robert Borrera. It is an unnecessary ecological impact. The existing boardwalk should be utilized. The golf cart occurs, so it's another golf cart comment, and then potential flooding impact. We have a William Boyd who's also opposed. We have a Don Small who's opposed for dune preservation and noise. We have a John Wysilas who's opposed, saying that the portion of the proposed house extending past the 350-foot county setback requirement was opposed in 2011. New construction should conform to existing codes at the time of construction. All right, this is a letter from the board members of Lost Colony. It says, we, the Lost Colony Council of Co-owners, would like to address application 20 BD 1002 concerning 106 Beachview Estates. We oppose the construction of this boardwalk for several reasons. And they keep mentioning that they oppose the boardwalk, once again, for loss of dunes, protecting the biological diversity, and that we will keep losing dunes due to hurricanes, and we lost dunes to Hurricane Hannah. And this opposition letter, staff did want to reach out to this board to reaffirm that with the removal of the boardwalk, if they were still opposed, staff was unable to reach them. So this did account for a majority of the opposition. It was 38% of the opposition because they were representing 21 members of that community.
Thank you. Are there any other comments that you have to read?
There are still further comments. I do apologize.
No problem.
Yeah, we do have a McClure who's also opposed. There's no comment there. We have a Rex Reed who is opposed, who mentions the 2011 enactment of the dune line, and it forever changed that building line. Therefore, there is no reason to consider allowing the construction of any single family home that would violate the dune protection line. We have Day and Paxton Smith, who are writing in opposition for the 30-foot variance to the encroachment into the dune protection line. The dunes have suffered so much damage and erosion from Harvey and Hannah. The vegetation is stripped away and we are losing the beach rapidly. I also believe that the setback was made for a reason and that it is to protect the dunes. We cannot afford to encroach upon them and ruin them. The golf cart flyover was ridiculous and invades privacy for the homes. There was a fence installed without checking to see where property lines were, and it is on both properties. And part of the fence butts up to many of the cable boxes, which limits access. Also, he did not ask anyone in Lost Colony if they were opposed to it. This man is pushing buttons, and they continue to say why they are opposed. We do have a William Summers who is opposed. Also, Suzanne Weissert, who's opposed. Okay, and the last letter is from Mr. Friedman, who's representing the Abel family. And I do believe we have him on the line, so I will save his comments. So for public comment, we do have a few more of the applicants here, and I can call, or sorry, the citizens here, I can call on Mr. Gary Gonzalez, I believe is on the line, and I will work to unmute you, sir. Hi, Gary.
Hi.
Can you hear us?
Craig, can you hear me?
Doing well.
Is that a yes?
Yeah.
I just want to be sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Craig, it's good to meet you, even if it's virtually. We've spoken pretty extensively and written extensively as well. Commissioners, thank you for moving the public comment. I own lost property number 3, which is directly adjacent.
Mr. Gonzalez, we are having a hard time hearing you.
Can you, I'm going to log in as the Energy and you can unmute Energy.
Okay, so we've allowed Energy to be.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I was saying, Craig, it's good to meet you virtually. We've communicated extensively, and Andrew as well. It's good to see you. Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I own Lost Colony Unit number 3, which is directly adjacent to the property in question. I can almost reach out and touch the property. It's that close. My concern pertains specifically to the impact of the ecosystem, the native plants and animals that are already in the dunes. Suffered a loss of that ecosystem during the recent storm. And with a property that's at least almost 0.9 acres, there is ample room to build a structure, and abiding by the existing, not projected, but existing setbacks is what is of utmost importance. I think we should be good stewards of the ecosystem and the environment. We should be good stewards of existing regulations and rules, and abide by that and be good neighbors as well. My concern for the encroachment and the exemption for a swimming pool is exactly that. The dunes have suffered a huge loss. We live in times where our environment is already being impacted by our modes of transportation. Weather is changing. I don't want to go down that line, but I do want to say that if we could do what we can in order to respect the environment and respect the little ecosystem that we already have beyond what Mother Nature has decided to reclaim, I think it's important and incumbent upon us to do that. My second, and I have about maybe 45 more seconds, my second comment has to do with the boardwalk. And while the boardwalk may or may not be on the current agenda, having the platform and waiting months to talk about it, I'm going to take the opportunity to do that. Building a walkover boardwalk for the purpose of using a golf cart to access the dunes or the beach is redundant and unnecessary. There is already a boardwalk structure, albeit next to an existing home whose owner probably does not welcome the expansion of that existing boardwalk, and therefore it's been proposed to have a second one for such a small community. However, I think, again, it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we are shepherds of the environment, shepherds of doing what's right by the ecosystem, which we do enjoy. And should that boardwalk come up in the future, or if it's coming up now, we'll certainly speak against it and advocate for the expansion of the existing boardwalk, which would only need be expanded by 2 feet wide. And so, again, while we take it for granted, the land that we walk on or the land that we view, what makes this space so special is its beauty, is its nature, whether it's plants or animals. And I think that that's the reason why we all go down there, why we live there, why we've invested in there. And it's important upon us to respect that and refrain from unnecessarily encroaching upon the nature that we enjoy so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there other comments at this time?
Yes, Craig. This is Frank Valadez. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Yes, I am a neighbor just 2 condos down from Mr. Gonzalez, who just spoke. Frank Valadez and my wife, Jackie Valadez, own Unit 1, which is directly adjacent to this property that's being considered for the variances. I am a licensed architect in Texas. My license number is 15586, and I'm also a licensed commercial real estate agent, license 682641. I was originally the architect that renovated all 21 units in 2014. Prior to Harvey, we were the architects that brought the property that was originally designed in '79 and brought it up to current wind and hurricane category 4 codes. And thank goodness we were able to survive Harvey based on that work. The reason why I'm speaking is for two reasons. The setbacks that are being discussed right now, the 350 feet, if we allow the property owner to encroach in that 350-foot zone, as being in the city limits of Corpus Christi, when you add a swimming pool, you're going to have life safety and have a fence around the swimming pool, and I have to check the codes if it's 48 inches or 5 feet, a security fence around any swimming pool in a setting like this to avoid children from getting into the property and actually drowning. So, and then the topography of the dunes is going to require the owner to raise the pool deck or require retaining walls to keep drainage and water and sand getting into the pool. So, and any pool designer is not going to guarantee their work unless they get above a certain grade to allow the pool to be drain properly, so that sand and organic material getting into the swimming pool. So if that pool was to be built in front of the 350 feet, we will have structure in a fence for security and retaining walls to protect his investment in the swimming pool. The other item in regards to the boardwalk being considered in the future, as Mr. Gonzalez had noted, there's already an existing boardwalk. Our property, as I mentioned, was built originally in '79. The whole development of this development next to us is half the size of Cinnamon Shores. It's also half the size of Palmia. And those two developments only have one boardwalk. They designed their boardwalk to include pedestrian and golf cart or beach cart access. And since there's one existing pedestrian walkway, it would be less evasive to extend that walk by an additional 3 feet, which would allow pedestrian and beach cart access to occur on that one existing boardwalk. So it would impact less the dunes and the ecosystem, as Mr. Gonzalez was mentioning, if they were to just adapt the existing boardwalk. And what helps also, since I was board president during Harvey for our property at Lost Colony. And the biggest challenge, as officials in the city of Corpus Christi may know this already, there was the damage of the storm was one thing.
Mr. Valdez,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Valdez, we are getting close to we've passed the 3 minutes.
Okay,
So I'll let you finish your statement.
Okay. I'll say one more statement. As everyone knows, following the storm Harvey, we had looters and vandals were entering the properties through these boardwalks because law enforcement couldn't cover both the beachfront and the street level. So having 2 boardwalks on this small development is going to create a security problem for all our properties being right on our property line. And that's all I need to say. And I appreciate the time and consideration on our comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez.
Thanks, sir.
Good evening. I'll go next if that's okay. This is Mr. Adam Friedman on behalf of the Ables. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, commissioners. Like I said, my name is Adam Friedman, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Joe and Cindy Able, and they are Mr. Gonzalez's neighbor Seaward, one home closer to the beach. And their property line also is directly, they share a property line with the applicant in the proposed construction project. And they first got wind of this project in sometime in October, and were notified shortly thereafter of the first attempt to permit this certificate application. So you can imagine the stress levels and the anxiety levels that I think you can hear in the Valdez's and Mr. Gonzalez's voices that was thrown at these folks without little warning. And fortunately, we've had a little bit of time because of some missteps with the application to really piece this puzzle together. And what we've seen and learned is that the applicant really made some significant errors, and perhaps not too maliciously. Part of it was the fact that Hannah happened to hit just before the county took up their dune protection permit application. And it really changed the scope of that application. And compounding that problem was the applicant failed to provide any notice whatsoever to any of these landowners for that hearing at the county. Now that's for the dune protection permit, but that directly affects the decision tonight on the construction certificate, because you have to make sure that those requirements are met before ruling or weighing or approving on the construction certificate. I think Mr. Garrison said it best when he said this is kind of putting the cart before the horse. And that's one of the things that the Ables have asked, is to simply not make the decision on the construction certificate tonight. Let that process play out at the county. Now, it's unclear what application is currently pending at the county. What we know is back in July that they approved the dune protection permit for the boardwalk and the house. And that's real problematic that that occurred without notice to anybody. So it's unclear what's pending. We know that the issued permit back in July is invalid. It was based on the wrong vegetation line. And maybe that's what's trying to be fixed now. But it really is premature to weigh in on the certificate, construction certificate tonight before that process plays out. Now, there's been plenty of assurances that that walkover is no longer part of the application, but there's nothing that's formally been filed. I've been told it was done by email, which I'm not sure is a formal amendment to the application. It's a little unclear what will be taken up tonight, but the February 27th, 2020 application was never amended. The revised site plan that was submitted by the applicant with the new vegetation line clearly shows the walkover still there. And the GLO letter in November of 2020 clearly states that they're seeking a, quote, dune walkover for golf cart access. So I think it's very unclear what still remains. And until that application is formally amended, it just adds to the reason to not make this decision. And that's, I'm sorry. Is there a question? Okay, I'll wrap up. But you know, so that's really the big thing with the construction certificate. It's unclear what has been even applied for and what remains, and the failure to satisfy the dune permit requirement by failing to give notice, and it's never been evaluated with the proper vegetation line, which I think is what Mr. Garrison was alluding to, that process is playing out now. So I think for the construction certificate, it ought to be either tabled or denied. And finally, with the erosion plan exemption, it's pretty clear that from the site plan that there's 100 feet or so to the north of the current proposal. And it sounded like there's only 40 feet of encroachment from the house. And the response plan is pretty clear that it's only when there are no alternatives. And I just wanted to, I'm not going to rehash what some of the other commenters have had, but there is a practical alternative, which is to move the house 40 feet to the north and avoid encroaching that building line and avoid impeding those dunes.
Mr. Freeman.
Yes, sir.
Freeman,
that's why
we're reaching 6 minutes here.
Well, I'll just wrap up with the Ables. And for those reasons, I've also requested that the JERP exemption be denied. And thank you, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any other comments?
I do believe we have an applicant on the line. I believe it's Craig Thompson.
Thank you, Craig. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. I do appreciate a chance to be heard. A couple comments to talk about. Yes, this was submitted to Nueces County. I think you mentioned prior to the storm, it was approved at the Nueces County Dune Protection Committee. As far as responding to Mr. Friedman about lack of public notification, I do believe that meeting was notified. I don't know. I don't manage the public notification. I do want to say a little bit about the property itself. This property was platted within that subdivision prior to the 350-foot line being established. There have been two buildings or two homes that are in that cul-de-sac on the very eastern edge of this development that have already been built. They used very similar building lines. I forwarded an email to city staff from those two homeowners and the HOA itself that asked that the rear building line be respected, so that the building concept of those two homes, that neighborhood integrity be continued. It is interesting to hear folks who live in possibly one of the worst cases of nonconformance with regard to the 350-foot building line, to have them in full opposition of building a home that is very consistent with the other homes in the subdivision. By the way, I did want to mention one thing about swimming pools. The swimming pools are not considered habitable structure. The 350-foot building line is about habitable structures. You can build things like pools and decks and amenities seaward of that 350-foot building line. I just wanted to be clear about that. And also, I wanted to make it very clear to everybody on this call, if something different were needed, Craig, I would have expected staff to let me know that something different were needed, but we did remove the dune walkover from this application, and the request that is in front of you is just for the home and just for the exemption to move it 30 or 40 feet forward. And I also will say about the vegetation line. The vegetation line moves all the time, every day. It was this building line that we're asking to be using now was well within, or was respecting the 350-foot line prior to the storm. As happens many times, if you look at historical areas with regard to the vegetation line, that it moves after a storm, it will move landward, and then it will start to accrete and move seaward. And it's an ongoing process with regard to that. So that is why I felt comfortable in asking for the variance. And I'll answer any questions that staff or the commission may have.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Thompson.
Craig. Yep. And Commissioner, I do have one other public opposition from a Mr. Canton, who is opposed. We just received that.
Thank you, sir. At this time, do any commissioners have any comments for Mr. Thompson, for the applicant?
This is Commissioner Schrader. Mr. Thompson, does the proposal of moving this 40 feet forward of the current 350 foot vegetation line setback, does that impact any existing dunes? Topography does not show on this, so what is the spirit of this, as I understand the law, is a big portion of this is to make sure that existing dunes are protected and not eroded. And so does this particular property have dunes that will be cut into with this building site?
So Commissioner Schrader, there's two different things I think we're talking about. You're mentioning dune impacts, and the dune impacts are all the way from the beach until the 1,000 foot dune protection line. Any impacts to dunes within that entire area, whether you're building a boardwalk, whether we're building pools that are allowed out inside the 350 foot area, whether you're building a home, all those dunes, if they're impacted, are mitigated for, and the mitigation is completed and done on this property and landward. The answer to your question directly, yes, there are dunes that are being impacted with the construction of the driveway, of the home, and of the pool, and those impacts are part of the mitigation plan that was approved. But like I've mentioned before, it wouldn't matter if I had something 500 feet from the vegetation line. If it's impacting a critical dune, which is within that 1,000 foot dune protection line from mean high tide, it would have to be mitigated for.
Okay, and that's a prior permit that has already been
No, Commissioner Schroeder, that is part of this permit. It is part of this permit.
Okay, and so what is the plan, or what is the dune mitigation plan? Is that
so the dune mitigation, what we're required to do, Commissioner Schrader, is we're required to do what's called a 1-to-1 mitigation. So every volume, every cubic yard of impacted dune is moved landward, and every bit of the vegetation that is impacted is part of that mitigation as well.
It's moved
so the volume and the vegetation that's impacted is mitigated for seaward of the construction.
Okay, seaward. Okay, got it.
Yep,
Okay.
seaward. Absolutely.
Yep.
No, it's one thing, and this, by the way, has gone through GLO. I don't know if Mr. Garrison included that comments back from GLO, but there were comments back from GLO, and we did go back and forth. Obviously, this was submitted to the city prior to Hurricane Hannah, and so some of the delay on this, not some, all of the delay on this has been to kind of address some of the comments from GLO about the 350-foot line moving and the vegetation line movement, and then to obviously change the dune walkover to remove it from the request.
Okay, well, you've answered my question. What I didn't see in our packet anything that spoke to the dune mitigation, so that's the reason for my question. So
nope.
You've answered.
It is part of it.
And this is Craig Garrison, city planner. I do want to confirm that part of the beachfront construction certificate package is to have a mitigation plan, or as an erosion response plan, where they show how they are going to move vegetation from the actual site of construction to a site more seaward, and then basically construct a new dune and repopulate it with the same vegetation that was at the site of construction. And that's articulated in the mitigation plan that was submitted, and it was reviewed by city staff and GLO staff.
And it is in the packet, by the way. It shows on page 7 of the report, and it shows 287 cubic yards being cut and then 287 cubic yards being filled.
Oh, okay. I was, sorry, I tend to look for graphics, so. Oh, there
Right
it is.
here. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And then real quickly, there was a comment that staff would like to address for the dune protection permit and public notification process. Within our Unified Development Code, it does state that the dune protection permit does need to have notification if city staff is the one administrating the beachfront construction certificate. And City of Corpus Christi just has jurisdiction within Clayburgh County, and within Nueces County boundaries, it'll actually be Nueces County that'll be the proctor for the dune protection permit. And to my understanding, I do not believe they have public notification requirements. I know that Juan Pimentel was on the line with us earlier, but that would be for county staff to inform us if they require to have notification or not. And then lastly, we just want to confirm, just as the applicant said, there is no boardwalk being considered with the application at this time. It was formally removed from the beachfront construction certificate application.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments for the applicant before I close the public hearing portion? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing portion and entertain additional comments, questions, or motions.
This is Commissioner Schrader again. I have a question for Mr. Garrison. It's more of a, I guess, I'd like, if the other folks are still on the line, to be able to hear response to this. But in my understanding, particularly hurricanes such as Ike, that leveled the Bolivar Peninsula, those people who lost property in storms like that because it changed the shape of the beach, changed the dune line, that is no longer property, is my understanding, and they were never allowed to rebuild. So I think that's in the back of, that is still the case here. Is it not, Mr. Garrison?
Right. So I had to get a little help from my staff here. Is that Nueces County, through our joint erosion response plan, our interlocal agreement, they, after a major storm event, have to resurvey the new line of vegetation within a 6-month timeline. And so I do know that the county is currently in the process of resurveying where the dunes are at, and also where the dune protection line is, which that's the 1,000-foot line that the applicant Craig Thompson had referred to earlier.
So, I mean, as an example of, I guess what I'm asking is, if, say, for example, a development like the one adjacent to this property, if the structures were damaged beyond habitability, and that dune line, which is very thin in the front of those existing structures, were moved, and the vegetation line moved, the property owners cannot rebuild those structures if they are now in that dune erosion line. Is that the way the process works?
So those same structures that are currently existing non-conforming would have to get a dune protection permit or exemption from Nueces County, and then also have to apply for the beachfront construction certificate, such as the Emmons LLC applicant. That said, they're encroaching much further into the erosion response area, and would also have to apply for an exemption from development services staff as well, just like this applicant.
Okay, that's what I thought I understood. So our decision would effectively set any kind of precedent for them later on as well. In other words, how strongly we choose to treat this situation potentially has impact down the road, as everybody has pointed out here. The vegetation and dune line, this is a constantly moving island. So structures on this island are much less permanent than other areas.
Yes, Commissioner Schrader, and it would have to go through the same public process as this has been going through. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments for staff or discussion among commissioners? All righty. Do I have a motion to approve, amend, or deny item 22? Or table? There's several options.
And just to confirm, you can approve with conditions or disapprove, and then just a frame of reference. Conditions could include features that staff has previously included in this application as far as requirements. That makes sense.
Thank you for clarifying.
This is Michael York. I'll make a motion that we approve the item as presented by staff.
This is Commissioner Schrader. I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, moving on, it just moves directly to adjournment. Are there any other comments for the Dune Commission?
No comments from staff?
Any comments from staff or anybody?
No, sir.
All right.
Thank you for hanging here. Just, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank all the planning commissioners for hanging in there with us. It's a long meeting, but I appreciate your patience and all of your hard work.
We owed you a long one after the Zoom meeting, Andrew. We got a break for a few months, so we were due.
We were due. It's not as bad as when we did playing TC, so that's good. All righty, you guys. I will talk to you all soon. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.